everybody, and welcome back to episode 2 of the Hangar Bay, bringing you a personal favorite of mine, the Heinkel HE-111. Now, ever since I was a kid, this plane always fascinated me. I just loved the curves, the beauty of it, and I think possibly watching the movie The Battle of Britain probably also heightened that, because I probably watched that dozens of times every year when I was growing up. Just a beautiful looking airplane, very sleek, aerodynamic, but unfortunately didn't really live up to its expectations. So what I've done here, and I'll show you, is for my sculpts for Global War 1936, I have the standard black gloss color painted with the orange to represent medium bombers. They originally were red, but of course, because of Global War 36 and so many selection of units, orange was the best color to pick. Now, on these particular units, as you can see here, I have put some detail in here with some swastika flags, and on the fuselage, put the German Bullcaroos as well as on the wingtips, and I think they actually look pretty good. And this was, of course, the brainchild of Siegfried and Walter Gunther. She first flew in February 24th, 1935, and she basically had an active service life of 1935 to 1944, at which she really outlived her usefulness and didn't have much more of a practical use. But she did participate in virtually every major theater in Europe, and that's also why I'm not just showing you those two variants, but I'm also going to show you my Africa Corps versions. And this is the dark yellow color used on Tamiya, their paint color system, and I felt it just gave it a nice Africa Corps color. And I put in the German swastika and the on the actual ventral wing there, and then of course on the fuselage and on the actual wings I put the German Bullcaroos, just like the other one there, but just a little bit different flavor. And of course this turned out actually pretty good. And I haven't done any camo yet with these particular units, but eventually I hope to possibly think about it. But for now, I'm just, to protect the labeling and the decaling, I just spray painted it with a gloss coat. So yeah, no, actually they turned out really, really good. Consequently enough, these Heinkels, they usually had a crew of 5. You either usually had a navigator, a bombardier, nose gunner, which also there was a ventral gunner, dorsal gunner, which also was a radio operator, and of course your side gunner too as well. So it just depended. There was many variants made, but throughout the war itself, from 1935 and onwards, many factions actually used the Heinkel HE-111, and a lot of Axis powers, but one was Bulgaria, China, Czechoslovakia, Germany, Hungary, Romania, Turkey, the Spanish forces, and so on and so forth. This right here is our winter version for our winter or Arctic Corps or winter camo. This is just done up by me. As far as camouflage for these units, I could start doing some black speckling on there, but I think I like the white in general. I mean, you're going to know this is a German plane just by off the bat there, just by the silhouette and the shape, which is once again why I love the Heinkel. And actually, just a small note here: the engines themselves was one of the downfalls, because they usually sometimes were underpowered, more often than not, and that was the biggest problem with the Heinkels. As well, and of course the maneuverability against fighters was obviously not the greatest either, and consequently German engineers and designers did many variants. There's over 100 different variants, and even some actually had rockets on the bottom of the planes there to give them a little bit more propulsion, taking off, and also carrying a larger payload as well. But yeah, ultimately at the end of the war, like I say, Spain was probably the longest user of these Heinkels. by like 1958, they were still using them. And of course, that's where, if you watch the old movies like from Battle of Britain, that's where a lot of these planes actually came from, was from the Spanish and other militaries at the time that had conventional medium bombers, because the fascist Spain at the time was a kind of a semi-ally of the German state. And like I say, the variations were endless. As far as production-wise, with the Heinkel HE-111s, usually you saw a little bit over 1,200 being built every year from 1942 all the way up to 1944. And by the time the end of 1944, from October to December, they just didn't build any. Like, it was just done for the Germans, and of course they just didn't have much of a use for a medium bomber at that time. I just really love the cockpit, and you can see in some of these images how it's offset. It was always one of my favorite bombers, just the sleekness, and of course you were very vulnerable if you were the forward gunner in one of these placements, because it's all mostly glass, and you didn't have much protection. And of course the pilot and navigator were not far behind, but also many people had to do double shifts in like that. Now there are some variants out there, and some people may notice that there was a Heinkel version. It was called the HE-111Z, and it was basically a Heinkel like this combined together, but it also had a fifth engine in the middle. And it was just a prototype, but it was designed to carry the Messerschmitt Me-321, the Moment glider, which also actually made an appearance in Operation Winter Solace, as I painted up and deckled that particular unit up. But that was, yeah, a very unique plane, because basically it had 5 engines, which was enough to carry it on, to carry the Moment glider, to bring in some heavy equipment into other theaters of war. But of course that was a prototype and really didn't end up in service much. Basically, at the end of the day, when you had these fighters, there was about 32 prototype aircraft. Some of them were converted into civilian use, and others mostly were designed for the pre-war era, just over 800 of them, which obviously fought in the Spanish Civil War and other theaters, and consequently over 5,600 planes were in fact used between 1939 and 1944. And you know, they were basically the visual concept, in my opinion, or the visual projection of what German bombers were. Now, granted, they had the Dorniers, you know, and they also had Messerschmitts, Junkers, all other various forms of bombers, heavy bombers, medium bombers, but I've always believed the German Heinkel represented the bomber of choice. And once again, if you watch movies like Battle of Britain, Patton, you'll see the Heinkel in great numbers, because they were used still when they were filming those movies in other air forces around the world. So all in all, though, there was about 6,508 planes built before the end of the war. And that was the HE-111s. It'll probably always have a special place in history for me, just even the way the engines and the air scoops on the engines, even the tires and the landing gear, the planes, just the plane's aerodynamics were just one of my favorites of all time. But anyways, guys, this is just a brief summary of the Heinkel HE-11s. They did have basically a decent track record for the German Luftwaffe in the Second World War, and hopefully you found some of this information insightful, and also different ways and different versions you can paint your German planes for games like Global War 1936, Global War 1940, Axis and Allies, or even the BBR series designed by Sireblood himself. So take care, everyone, and stay classy. And this is Panzer King here, bringing you an end to episode 2 of the Hangar Bay. You guys all stay classy.